This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Niger's situation remains fluid as army backs coup plotters. Russia's Putin promises African leaders free grain despite Western sanctions. And Sudan Army mediation team returns home from Jeddah for consultations. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Vivier. Here are more stories making headlines. In business news, Ethiopia's state-run telecoms provider projects a revenue increase of about $1.6 million this year. And in sports, South Africa's Banyana draw 2-2 with Argentina at the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023. The ongoing military takeover in Niger has drawn both regional and international condemnation. The African Union, West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS, the European Union and the United Nations have all reacted to the unfolding events. On Wednesday, a group of soldiers from the Presidential Guard declared that they had stripped President Mohamed Bazoum of his powers. Various nations have also condemned the takeover, among them France. His Foreign Minister, Catherine Colonna, says that a coup in Niger is not definitive. She says those responsible still have time to reinstate the ousted president. According to Colonna, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke to Bazoum early on Friday, and he says Bazoum is reachable and in good health. Back in 2021, Bazoum was elected president in Niger's first peaceful democratic transfer of power since its independence from France in 1960. Efforts to try to resolve the current situation in Niger so far include ECOWAS appointing Benin's president Patrice Talon to mediate in that situation.
Leaders have warned that unconstitutional power grabs greatly undermine efforts to stabilize Africa's Sahel region. The unfolding events in Niger may lead to a seventh such military takeover in West and Central Africa since 2020. Niger itself has experienced 4 coups since 1960. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has joined other leaders in calling for a return to order.
I spoke yesterday with President Bazoum. I don't know exactly where he is, but he was detained. He told me he was well, but he told me that the situation was very serious. And that is the reason why I made today a very strong appeal, not only for him to be immediately released, but not only that, for the democratic institutions to be reestablished.
The events in Niger show a worrying trend for the Sahel. From Mali in the west to Sudan in the east, the recurrence of coups has given way to the rise of military-led governments. These unconstitutional transitions of power come amid anti-insurgency operations in the region. Western nations have been looking to Niger to bolster the fight against militants by boosting its security forces.
I am indeed extremely worried. If you look at the region, you have a dramatic terrorist increase of activity in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and coming closer and closer to the countries of the coast. You have military regimes in Mali, in Burkina Faso, now eventually in Niger, a fragile transition in Chad, and an horrible situation in Sudan. So we are witnessing that the whole belt south of the Sahara is becoming an extremely problematic area with terrible consequences for their populations and with terrible consequences for peace and stability in the African continent and further afield.
The situation in Niger is still uncertain, as some say the coup is not yet definitive. For now, all political activities remain suspended and borders closed as the wait continues. Anastasia Waweru for CGTN.
Well, let's not get the latest from Niger. Our correspondent, Gary Amadou, is in the capital, Niamey, and joins us now. Hi there, Gary. From what we're hearing and all the reports that are coming through, Gary, tensions remain high between supporters of the coup and people loyal to the deposed government. What is the latest on the situation in Niger today?
The situation is, let's say, a kind of a statu quo, because there is no movement from the beginning of the coup to now. We do not know who is the leader of the junta. We do not know who will lead the country to election or what, something also. And we have the pressure of international community, United Nations, ECOWAS, African Union. So it seems that there are some problems between junta members to know who will be the guy who will lead, the country, who will lead the transition.
So from what we're hearing, Gary, and from what you've just said now, you say that it's not clear yet who is in charge of the coup. But can you perhaps tell us what the reasons you think might be behind this coup?
Yeah, you know that the one who is, the one who begin, let's say the coup is the bust of presidential guard. So after that, he have rallies from let's say other companies from the army, from the police, and other companies. But he's the one who is supposed to be the leader. But it seems that in the army, some people would like to let's say to give another name to lead the country. So I don't think that maybe he will not accept this kind of situation. He considers that he's the one who begin the movement, and he'll be the one who will lead the country during the transition. I think that this is the main problem that they have now. So the situation is, let's say, blocked. Everything, we have no information. The only thing we know is that the President Bazoum is safe, his family is safe, and President Bazoum can talk with let's say, foreign president. He can talk with his let's say his family members or his relatives. Also, there is nothing. Things are left static.
Thank you so much for that update, Gary. Gary Amadou is in Niger's capital, Niamey. Well, analysts say the military takeover in Niger could have grave consequences for the nation's democratic progress. They're also concerned about how what is happening in Niger could affect its neighbors, especially because Niger has been a key player in the fight against militants in the region.
With the pullout of Barkhane from Mali, and also the rolling down of a lot of other security assistance, including MINUSMA in Mali and Burkina Faso, and everything kind of like pivoting towards Niger. I think there was a lot of hopes and aspirations by particularly the United States, but also obviously Europe and France, that Niger would remain this super stable bastion of this bulwark of democracy in the region, where we could anchor and pivot across the region, both east towards Sudan and west, obviously, towards Mali and Burkina Faso, to ensure, some kind of presence and figure out a way to potentially expand stability across the region to stabilization. However, if Niger does collapse and if our instrument has to leave Niger, that leaves a huge, blank spot in our grand strategy for the region.
Let's turn our attention to other news now. We head over to St. Petersburg in Russia, where the Russia-Africa summit is underway. President Vladimir Putin has told African leaders that Moscow respects their peace proposal on Ukraine and is carefully studying it. The Russian president also expressed interest in developing military cooperation with the continent. African leaders presented their peace initiative to both Putin and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky last month, but it has failed to gain traction with either side. Putin had initially approached the proposal by stating a list of Russia's grievances against Ukraine and the West. Meanwhile, Zelensky rejected the idea of a ceasefire that would leave Russia in control of nearly a fifth of Ukraine and, according to him, would give Russian forces time to regroup. Today is the final day of the two-day Russia-Africa summit, which began in St. Petersburg on Thursday. It has attracted 49 African delegations and 17 heads of state. Let's now go to St. Petersburg, where Isabel Nakira is standing by for us. Hi there, Isabel. Isabel, today is the second and final day of the Russia-Africa Summit. What is on the agenda?
Right about now, President Putin is meeting the Africa-led peace team on the situation in Ukraine. 7 presidents will be meeting President Putin to try and talk him out of the war in Ukraine. African leaders believe that peace can solve conflict other than war, and so they will be trying to convince President Putin to come to the table and talk to Ukraine so that war can come to an end. This is going to be the second time that these African leaders are meeting President Putin. The first meeting was about a month ago, but it did not yield much. And so President Putin says he's going to listen to each of the leaders on what they need to say about the situation in Ukraine. There will also be discussions with the presidents of Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Eritrea. These 3 countries have their own unique problems. Uganda is struggling to cope with millions of refugees, and lack of funding is stopping them from managing the situation. And the oil and gas sector also needs a lot of funding, and President Museveni yesterday told President Putin that they need Russia to help invest in the oil and gas sector. Eritrea is facing a worsening food crisis, and it has been one of the first countries that has received shipments from Russia, but privately the president is going to talk to President Putin on how to increase volumes of grain to Eritrea. We'll also have discussions on a single trading company to help African countries and Russian companies to establish businesses to allow a smooth flow of goods and services, and discussions on switching financial currencies to allow payments, including using the Russian ruble for financial payments instead of the dollar, which Russia does not use right now. We've also heard that Russia has written off debts to African countries worth over 20 billion shillings. And all of that, I think, will come at the end of the day with written cooperation agreements.
Well, Isabel, Russia's president yesterday had told African leaders that he would gift them tens of thousands and tons of grain within months. Are you hearing, Isabel, any details on how he plans to do that?
The Russian government says they are talking to African countries on establishing new logistic routes to allow shipments of grain reach Africa without the hurdles of insurance companies in the US and the UK. They are looking at talking to Qatar and Turkey to help them ship their grain direct to Africa. But also the Russian Export Center has also signed cooperation agreements with African leaders to establish investments and business connections so that Africa can receive grain easily. But we will be listening to what President Putin will say at the end of the day. He will be addressing the media to tell us more about how he plans to export grain to Africa or give grain free of charge.
Thank you so much for all that. Isabel Nakira speaking to us from St. Petersburg in Russia. Well, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has commended President Vladimir Putin for hosting the second Russia-Africa Summit. Speaking during a bilateral meeting, the two leaders agreed to deepen cooperation in nuclear power, energy, and space science. Cgtn's Daniel Arab Moy brings us those details.
Russia and Uganda have agreed to strengthen ties in the areas of oil exploration, nuclear power energy, fertilizers and space science. The bilateral agreement between Moscow and Kampala in space science is meant to enable Uganda to have its own dedicated satellite.
We have also agreed with the Russian groups on building a nuclear power station for generating electricity. And that one is going on, and I'm very happy with that.
The Ugandan leader proposed to his host, President Putin, to discourage by policy the importation of raw materials from Africa. Museveni urged the Russian Federation to work with African governments to add value to products at source to help transform the economies of the continent. On his part, President Vladimir Putin said that developing relations with African nations is one of the priorities of Moscow's foreign policy.
Russia remains committed to strengthening cooperation between Russia and Africa in economic, political, security, trade and humanitarian areas.
Uganda remains one of Russia's key partners and allies on the African continent, with the diplomatic relations between the two countries stretching over 60 years. Daniel Arab Moy, Cgtn, Nairobi, Kenya.
Here's some other news from Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo's army is accusing Rwandan Defense Forces of crossing the Congolese border on Thursday and attacking border security forces. The DRC army says it repelled the attack and forced Rwandan forces back across the border. Rwanda is yet to respond. DR Congo and Rwanda have been involved in a dispute since last year over the resurgence of the M23 rebel group. Kinshasa accuses Kigali of backing the group, which is active in eastern DRC. Kigali has repeatedly denied this. We're joined by Chris Ochamringa in Libera, North Kivu, and Ethan Tashobia, who's in Jinja, Uganda. Thank you so much to you both for being on Africa Live. Chris, let's begin with you. The DRC army has accused Rwandan Defense Forces of crossing the Congolese border and attacking border security. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this clash happened in Gisenyi, the border between the DRC and Rwanda, on Thursday. And according to a statement issued by the Congolese army, Rwandan Defense Forces crossed into Congolese territory and attacked their security, their troops along the border. And the Congolese asked for reinforcement. Many troops came and started fighting them and flushed them out and forced them to go out. According to a Congolese army officer, they are going to prepare, to fight against any incursion into their territory by the Rwandan forces. And this is something, that they had earlier issued a statement about a week ago, saying that the Rwandan government was planning, to attack eastern DRC, supporting the M23. But Rwanda had denied it. And Rwanda has not yet issued a statement about this latest round of fighting. But we spoke to a security expert in eastern DRC who said that the clash was sparked by a dispute between some Rwandan traders who were seeking to cross into eastern DRC to do some trade. Now, a Congolese soldier, denied them entry, and then a Rwandan army officer came to their rescue, came to help them to cross into the DRC. So this Congolese soldier opened fire, killed the Rwandan officer, and then the Rwandan troops came in to try and defend their colleagues. So there was a lot of an exchange of gunfire in that area, but no other people were killed. It was just one Rwandan army officer. And this is all part of the tension between Rwanda and the DRC that was being triggered by the continued presence of the M23 rebels in North Kivu province. International community and many regional players from the East African community have urged Rwanda and the DRC to resolve this dispute through dialogue, but the two leaders don't seem to be interested in having that. They accuse each other of supporting rebel groups. Congo says Rwanda is supporting the M23. Rwanda is accusing DRC of supporting the FDLR, Hutu-led militia group of soldiers who were accused of carrying out the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. So the situation, it's really gotten worse, and people in that area are bearing the brunt of all this.
Thank you for all that, Chris. Let's go to Ethan now. Ethan, what has been Rwanda's reaction that its forces crossed the Congolese border and attacked border security there?
I think for the last 1 year or so, we've had such accusations being traded between the two countries, and this is probably the latest one we've had, accusing Rwanda of sending the troops and the Rwandan troops crossing into Democratic Republic of Congo. Before we went live on air, about 5 minutes ago, actually, the Rwanda Defense Force issued a statement responding to that, and that's the latest we actually have. And if you allow me, I'll read part of it. They're actually refuting the claims, saying that the accusations are baseless and are part of the long-standing pattern of misinformation and propaganda by DRC leadership to divert attention from their internal failures in maintaining peace and security within their borders. And this, they mean the eastern part of DRC. So we've had this statement coming up about 5 minutes ago before we went live on air. And what Rwanda is saying is that this has been there for a long time, and DRC is failing actually on their part to ensure stability, especially in the eastern DRC, where there's so many rebel groups, over hundreds of them. But, you know, Rwanda, at some point, the president of Rwanda, some years back, he said that there's no way, if there's an enemy coming to attack Rwanda, they will not wait for the enemy to reach the Rwandan territory. They will find them where they are. So we're not sure if this is what Rwanda is doing, but what we read from the statement is that they are falsely refuting the claims by the DRC Army, DRC National Army, National Force, saying that the Rwandan forces had crossed into eastern DRC. We'll wait to see if there is another statement that will be coming from DRC. But what Chris said, it's true. The two countries are trading accusations, especially on one, Rwanda being accused of empowering and supporting M23 that is causing a lot of havoc in eastern DRC. But also, Rwanda is accusing DRC of supporting FDR, an army that is led by majority Hutu leaders who were in the army in 1994 and who were largely accused of committing the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda.
Ethan, thank you so much for all that. That was Christopher Mringa speaking to us from Libera, North Kivu, and Ethan Tashobia was speaking to us from Jinja, Uganda. The Sudanese army delegation has returned from Jeddah, where peace talks have been ongoing. An army statement said that they had departed Saudi Arabia back to Sudan for consultations, and that discussions would continue after obstacles were overcome. The latest round of negotiations, facilitated by Saudi Arabia and the United States, had resumed earlier this month. The meetings had sought to birth a ceasefire and end the conflict in Sudan that has been ongoing since April. The army says it left after differences on issues including so-called rebels evacuating civilian homes in the capital Khartoum. The paramilitary rapid support forces, on the other hand, say that the breakdown in talks has resulted from the army's demand to end a blockade in its headquarters in central Khartoum. Well, let's not take a short break. Here's what's still to come on Africa Live. Doctors in Nigeria continue their strike action over pay and conditions.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. Cgtn. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We head over to Nigeria, where thousands of doctors continue their strike to protest poor working conditions, shutting down healthcare and critical wards across the country's public hospitals. Nigerian doctors say there's an unprecedented number of them leaving Nigeria for better job offers abroad without being replaced. Jen Keo has the latest.
Patients seeking treatment in public hospitals in Nigeria are desperate. They are not getting the critical services they need as doctors are on a go-slow, protesting over pay and poor working conditions.
We are not asking for too much. We are saying they should increase the minimum wage because the current minimum wage is a criminal wage. It is not a living wage. It cannot take us anywhere. So that's why we are saying let the take-home take us home. The take-home cannot take us home again.
The doctors say there is unprecedented number of them leaving the country for better job offers abroad without being replaced at home. The Nigerian Medical Association records show a ratio of 2 doctors to 10,000 patients generally and 1 to 10,000 in some rural areas, which would make Nigeria's doctors staffing one of the worst globally.
It's unfortunate and it's something that no doctor enjoys. It's something that hurts everybody because in a working system, this is not right. Doctors are among the essential workers, or if not the most important people in the workforce of any country, and it's so bad for them to embark on industrial action like this.
Some 15,000 members of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors are participating in the strike that has shut down healthcare in critical wards across the country's public hospitals.
We cannot overemphasize the importance of this strike because some of the things we are demanding for are things that affect us personally. For somebody like me, I'm really overworked. I'll be on call for almost 48 hours. I don't go home to see my children. I don't see my husband. Government employed me. Government is not paying my salary, you know. I don't have that social relationship with my family. And here, with work, I don't even have money to feed myself. So I'm really helpless. So it's very important.
The doctors' strike has affected hospital services in Lagos and Abuja. Jane Kale, Cgtn.
The United Nations designates the 30th of July every year to advocate against the increasing problem of human trafficking worldwide. The theme of this year's World Day Against Trafficking in Persons strives to assist the victims of trafficking. Nigeria, like many parts of Africa, has been burdened with this and other forms of modern-day slavery. Cgtn's Kelechi Emekelam brings us the story of one survivor.
Joyce Vincent is a victim of human trafficking. Her life spiraled downwards in 2019 after she was tricked to leave her job in a financial institution with a promise of a better and higher paying job in Egypt. Not only was her journey to the North African nation torturous, she went through a terrifying ordeal in the hands of her traffickers.
This is not the kind of job we bargain in Nigeria. That they made me sew some things. I even borrowed some money, debts all over me, and now I'm working. They are collecting money from me. Then they beat me. I tried to run to go and make myself clear to the embassy. They caught me. They beat me up. They molested me. They raped me. And now I'm under contract job for 3 years.
Although Joyce is lucky to have escaped her tormentors and to be alive and back home, she's still traumatized by her ordeal. She's also yet to find her footing.
Remember, because at times when I remember, it depresses me a lot, and I feel as if I'm not really among, because I've lost so many things. I'm just kind of starting from afresh. For a lady like me to start doing labor work is, you know, that it's not really easy, but I have to do it to meet up living.
Human trafficking is prevalent in Nigeria. Like Joyce, many have become victims of exploitation, organ harvesting, child abuse, among others. Lawyer and human rights activist Olukayode Ajulo says poverty is the biggest driver of modern-day slavery in Nigeria.
Some people even they are looking forward to exploit them now because they have nothing to do. When someone has a job, you don't exploit such kind of person.
The trend of modern-day slavery is widespread in Nigeria. The metropolitan cities are set to have the highest number of cases of unpaid labor, child labor, human and organ trafficking, and more. Rights activists say the Nigerian public needs to be aware and enlightened of the dangers of modern-day slavery so that they do not fall victims of a widespread network of traffickers keen to exploit them. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, the business news is coming up after the short break. Here's what you can expect. Ethiopia's state-run telecoms provider projects a revenue increase of about $1.6 million this year. And Russia scraps part of its $684 million loan to Somalia.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Ethiopian state-owned Ethio Telecom has projected its total revenue to rise to around $1.65 million in the current financial year, which is a 19% increase. The telco expects its customer base to expand to 78 million people this year. According to an Outlook statement by the state-owned enterprise, users of its mobile money service, Telebir, have been also steadily increasing. The firm expects its customers to reach about 44 million. The Ethiopian government plans to sell a stake of up to 45% in the telecoms company after reviving a previously postponed privatization process. The telecoms industry is seen as a big draw for investors in Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's efforts to open up one of East Africa's largest economies. Ethio Telecom at present competes with Safaricom Ethiopia, owned by a consortium led by Kenya Safaricom, which started operations in October of 2022. Russia has granted debt relief on over $684 million owed by Somalia in a deal finalized on the sidelines of the Russia-Africa summit. Emerging from decades of civil war, Somalia is seeking to secure sweeping external debt relief under the International Monetary Fund and World Bank's heavily indebted Poor Countries Initiative. Somalia's Finance Minister Bihi Ege confirmed the deal with Moscow on the ministry's social media platforms. The agreement signed between Ege and Russia's Deputy Finance Minister Timur Maximov concerned Paris Club loans. Part of the debt would be immediately written off, while part would be subject to a rescheduling of payments. Somalia owed Moscow nearly $695 million in 2019. That's according to the IMF. South Africa's grain farmers have pulled off yet another bumper maize harvest. Crop sizes beat expectations, coming in at well over 16 million tons, which is one of the biggest yields ever recorded in the country. This is the fourth year running that South Africa has produced a decent crop to satisfy both local and export markets. CGTN's Ian Kenwa reports.
South Africa's maize farmers shrugged off a jittery start to the planting season, marred by higher input costs, heavy rains, and severe power cuts. Despite lower production, farmers turned out the second biggest crop harvest in history. Free State farmer Pierre Van Zyl is pleased with his yield, the largest he's seen in 7 years.
This year's harvest is very good, much better than we anticipated. It started very wet and we were worried that there would be flood damage. But the rain eased a bit and the season turned out well and the quality of the maize is good.
Over 16 million tons of yellow and white corn was produced, more than enough to feed local and overseas demand.
South Africa will have over 3 million tons for the export markets. Large part of this will go to the Far East. If you think about the China market, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, those are some of the markets that will be buying a lot of yellow maize. And of course, the African market for white maize will be also an important one.
Higher yields were driven by a good spell of rain. The stubbornly long La Nina could also shield against the approaching El Nino, which brings hot and dry conditions not favorable to maize production.
Even if we receive below normal rainfall, there will be good moisture to support the crop. We may not see as a big of a crop as the 16.4 million tons that we are expecting in the coming season that starts in October. But still, all of the estimates that I'm seeing there, they think that South Africa will remain a net exporter of maize even in the coming season.
Farmers have stored some of their grain for next season and put contingency plans in place.
We'll do things a little differently. We'll plant a little later. We might plant more sunflowers that can handle the drought. We'll make our plans to get through. We are aware of it and we have learned from El Niños before.
South Africa's 2024 maize crop is expected to be 1 million tons lower than this season, which may move farmers towards a bigger soya bean crop. But it will all depend on the intensity of El Niño, which is expected to push the mercury to record highs never seen in many parts of the globe. Ian Kinyo, Cgtn.
Well, the agriculture in Tunisia is quite the opposite. Authorities there have announced that the country's grain harvest has plunged this year by 60% due to an unprecedented drought. The decline in grain production is likely to deepen Tunisia's financial difficulties as it tries to clinch an international rescue package. Cgtn's Adnan Shawashi has more on that report.
The Tunisian Union of Agriculture and Fisheries said that devastating droughts have resulted in a catastrophic grain harvest throughout the country. Thousands of farmers in the North African state are facing bankruptcy amid concerns of food security.
Rain-fed farming constitutes most of Tunisia's cropland. Farmers and farmhands are suffering due to climate change and rain scarcity. The sustainability of the grain production system is at stake. The whole system could collapse and affect food security.
With domestic production insufficient to meet an annual consumer demand of 3.4 million quintals of grain, Tunisia depends on foreign imports to offset the imbalance. The country has been facing a shortage of essential commodities and bakeries fair closure as wheat shortage drags on.
We cannot make bread without wheat. The quantities are insufficient in the market. The cost of running a bakery is high, while wheat is not available.
Tunisian President Kais Saied has called on the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization to do more to enable the release of strategic stocks of cereals to ease the growing global grain crisis.
The quantities of cereals that have been stockpiled are far greater than the wheat that is being sold on the international markets. Are cereals food or a weapon? It seems that it has become a weapon, and this weapon has especially harmed those countries that are still described as developing countries.
According to the Agriculture Department, the average grain harvest in Tunisia over the past decade has been 1.5 million tons, compared to a consumption of 3.4 million tons. Last year's harvest was 750,000 tons, and the North African country must import 95% of its grains in 2023. Tunisia and the African Development Bank have recently signed a loan agreement worth $87 million. The credit facility will be used to increase the country's strategic grain storage capacity from 2 to 3 months requirements, and also to relaunch grain transport by rail. Adnan Shawashi, Cgtn, Tunis.
African champions South Africa were on course to pick up a first ever Women's World Cup victory in a pulsating encounter in Dunedin, New Zealand. But at the end, they had to settle for their first point after Argentina scored twice within 5 second-half minutes. Glasgow City winger Linda Motlalo gave South Africa the lead after being teed up by Thembi Kgatlana, who was shown to have stayed out onside following a video assistant referee review. Captain Kgatlana doubled Banyana Banyana's lead in the 66th minute. However, a lapse in concentration allowed the Argentines back into the game when Sophia Braun scored in the 74th minute. 5 minutes later, substitute Romina Nunes equalized for the South Americans.
Yeah, I think it's the intensity of playing at the World Cup, you know. We started very well the first half. even the second half to score the 2 goals. And then I think we started getting tired and fatigued. And you could see in our decision making and the things we're doing. We're not doing the things that we're supposed to do like we did in the first half. And that cost us 2 goals. And I can imagine the frustrations from my teammates. But personally, I think getting 1 point is better than losing all the points, because the match against Italy, then we have a little bit of control of what we can do. But if we lost the match today, we wouldn't have the control because it would have slipped our hands.
European champions England have gone top of Group D following their 1-0 win over Denmark at the Allianz Stadium in Sydney, Australia. Chelsea ladies forward Lauren James scored the sole goal of the game in the 6th minute when she fired a shot from outside the 18-yard box. The win puts England through to the knockouts on top of their group with a game against 1999 finalist China, their last match of the group stage. China will be playing their second match against Haiti in just a matter of minutes at the Hinmarsh Stadium in Adelaide. England's win over Denmark leaves the second spot in the group open for the other 3 teams. Well, still in the Women's World Cup, China are looking to rebound after their opening Women's World Cup loss to Denmark with a victory over Haiti in their second group match on Friday. The 1999 finalists lost their opening Group D game 1-0 to Denmark. China has never failed to reach the knockouts in all their 8 previous appearances at the World Cup. However, they will need a win against Haiti's side that posed problems for England despite them losing 1-0. Both teams know that a loss in this tie would mean almost certain elimination from the competition. For China, this is a must-win as they face European champions England in their final group game. Nigeria produced the first major shock of the Women's World Cup as they stunned Australia 3-2 on Thursday to leave the co-host tournament hopes on thin ice. Uchenna Kanu cancelled out Emily van Egmond's opener on the cusp of halftime, and Osinachi Ohala nudged Nigeria ahead after the break. Asisat Oshuala volleyed into an open goal in the 72nd minute to seal a deserved win for the Africans. Australia had cut the deficit to 1 goal when Alana Kennedy nodded home a header in the 10th minute of stoppage time. However, Nigeria rode out the final seconds to claim one of their finest wins in their 9th appearance at the global showpiece. The win puts Nigeria top of Group B, level with Canada on 4 points, but ahead on goal difference. The 11-time African champions eliminated Ireland in their last group match.
They're still singing and dancing right now. I can't get in there and get a word in edgewise. Obviously an amazing feeling, and I'm so proud of these players because so many people didn't believe. So many didn't believe in me, didn't believe in the team. And the one thing that we have done is we've talked about believing in each other, and the strength of our success is going to be in the unity of the team. And to think that we've come in here and gotten two results out of 2 top teams in the world says a lot to not only our ability, but to just the heart and the competitive desire that the team has.
To international football news now. Former Spain international David Silva announced his retirement on Thursday. It came days after suffering an anterior cruciate ligament injury in preseason training with his club. A 37-year-old midfielder injured his left knee earlier in July while training ahead of his 4th season with La Liga. Silva had trophy-laden spells at Premier League, La Liga, and the Spain national team. He won major trophies, which include the World Cup in 2010 and the European Championship twice with Spain. He won the Copa del Rey twice, once with Valencia in 2008 and his last trophy with Sociedad in 2020. His most successful club spell came with Manchester City, where he won the Premier League 4 times, the FA Cup twice, and 5 League Cups. Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember that you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. From me, Hannah Vivia, and the rest of the Africa Live team, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time.